In the last episode, I left off saying that I was about to head to the Netherlands to buy a house. And in this episode, I will tell you the story of what happened. Since moving to Minneapolis over 20 years ago, I've rented, owned a condo, sold the condo, and bought my dream house on a lake in an inner suburb. I've got some experience with what it's like to buy and sell and move, so I felt I was prepared for this step. My realtor said it was a serious buyer's market, and with how nicely updated my house was, she expected it would sell within a week, maybe even at the open house. With this in mind, I headed out to the Netherlands with my list of 10 houses to check out. I gave myself about 4 days to do this, which admittedly wasn't very many. While I technically had the whole week off, I wasn't able to be gone for very long because I just received that large shipment of velomobiles, which had been delayed by several weeks. In addition to preparing my house to sell, I also had to prepare all of those bikes to go quickly to new owners. I didn't really want a garage full of expensive carbon velomobiles when people are viewing the house. My flight to Brussels arrived bright and early at 7 a.m. The passport line was quite long, but even so, I was in my rental car on the way to Zeeland before 9 a.m. I met my makelaar, the realtor, Angelique, shortly before lunchtime, and we toured several houses. The first house was the one I was the most interested in. I liked the layout and especially the office space on the main floor off the kitchen. It had a very large yard and a pretty good-sized garage. It also had quite an attractive price. Now, one of the first things you learn when buying a house is that houses rarely look as nice in pictures as they do in person. House number 1 was very quickly removed from the list of options. The brickwork needed regrouting. The kitchen appliances, I'm pretty sure, were from the 70s. The bathroom badly needed updating. The carpet was disgusting. And essentially, the whole house needed an overhaul and some mold remediation. On to house number 2. This one was much better than the first, but the owner had done some of his own remodeling and frankly didn't do the quality of work that I'm accustomed to. It was habitable and in a nice area, and the garage, despite having an asbestos roof, was at least functional, so I left it on the list as an emergency option. On to house number 3. This one was definitely better. Still kind of dated, and the purple oven and the pink bathroom fixtures definitely were not my thing. It also didn't have a garage, and the shed was not nearly large enough for a velomobile. It did have solar panels, the brickwork was recently redone, and it was habitable. I left it on the list with the caveat that the owner had been deemed legally unable to make decisions for herself and had failed to sign over decision-making to a family member. That would mean the purchase would have to clear through the court system, and that could take a while. On to house number 4. Number 4 is a house that will forever live in my memory, and that of my makelaar. This house had been a top choice of mine as well. Very nice layout, biggest garage of any house on my list. But then we walked into the house. There are some things that pictures cannot capture. In this case, it was the smell of pet urine and cigarette smoke that was overwhelming. In fact, I think it was by far the most horrid smelling house I've ever been in. I don't know how anybody can even live in a house like that. I felt bad for the owner's realtor being stuck having to sell that disaster. Upon leaving, my realtor said it was the worst house she had ever been in as a realtor. Since it was the last house of the day, we both agreed very quickly that we were on our way home to take a shower. I spent the evening exploring the small walled village of Hulst, with its fortifications, town gate, windmill. It confirmed my immediate impression of Zeeland being a pretty nice place to live. In addition to scenic towns, I marveled at how perfectly flat it was. And believe me, when they say the Netherlands is flat, you have no idea how flat it is until you've been here. The tulip fields were in bloom. It was refreshing to see bike paths everywhere. So yeah, I could be quite happy living here, I thought. Day 2 of house hunting began with me neglecting to calculate just how far Zeeland is from one end to the other, and arriving late at my first house viewing, having also lost about 15 minutes getting stuck at a lift bridge in Terneuzen. The first house was right by the windmill in Eisendyke, yet another scenic little town. It was also right by the grocery store and had a very nice garage. However, it only had 2 bedrooms, which would mean I would have a guest room in my room and no office space, and a very bizarre and dated bathroom, and some moldy walls in the living room. The kitchen was quite large, though. I left it on the list, but only as an emergency option and solely because I really liked the location. In addition, it was one of the most expensive houses on my list. The next house was in the countryside and the only freestanding house on my list. It had a very large 2-car garage, but the garage was across the street and hooked up to the neighbor's power supply. That's not really great for someone planning to run a lot of power tools. The house itself was kind of a disaster. There's no central heating, just a very dated fireplace of some sort in the living room. The bathroom was very dated and disgusting. The brickwork was in terrible condition. It was a very bizarre layout of the upper floor with kind of sort of 2 bedrooms, but not really. The insulation would need to be redone and hardly any appliances in the kitchen. And in fact, I believe there was no oven in the kitchen. I was shocked to learn someone had actually lived here year-round. It wasn't just a holiday house. I took that one off the list right away. The final house I viewed that day was another crazy situation. It was partially remodeled, and the remodeled part was really quite nice. When I asked the realtor why it was only partially done, she told me the rather sad story. The owner and his girlfriend had been fixing it up to sell it, and then were going to take the money and tour the world. Then the girlfriend dumped him, and he became so depressed that he stopped working on the house. She confided in me that he would probably be willing to sell it at a loss, like at 200,000 euros. This was kind of appealing, until I walked into the bedroom and was overwhelmed by the smell of body odor and cigarette smoke. The discarded cigarette butt and lack of a sink in the bathroom sealed the deal. I'm going to pass on that one. My final day of house hunting happened to be National Open House Day. This was the day with the most house viewings. I started out viewing a lovely cottage in Oostburg. The living room and kitchen had a beautiful view of a wetland area called the Grote Gat, which is the big hole. It also had a very large shed with an upper floor that would be quite good for velomobile activities. The only catch is that the kitchen was tiny and had no oven or refrigerator. The current owners had stuffed a mini fridge and a toaster oven in a cupboard. There was at least a decent-sized utility room nearby where a person could put a large refrigerator, but there still really wasn't a place for an oven. The bedrooms were also pretty small, and in reality, the house was the smallest one on the list. However, it was at least nicely updated, and it did have a really killer view. I told my realtor, this is the one. Since I had some time before the next house on the list, I thought, I'll just stop by this nearby village to look at another house. It wasn't one I was very interested in, and the pictures looked pretty bad, but it was close by, and I had nothing else to do. In the U.S., when you visit an open house, the realtor does the tour. All the houses I had viewed so far have been with the realtor of the seller present. However, it appears that sometimes the owner does the open house themselves, because that's who I met at the next house. And this owner was a real gem. She lovingly described all the updates they'd done to the house. They had upgraded the energy rating to the top rating with new windows, more insulation, and 11 solar panels. Frankly, the house was in the best shape of any house I'd viewed so far. It didn't have a garage, but the owner explained to me the local rules about how to add one without having to get a permit. There were also 2 sheds, one of which had been converted to a workshop. The owner sealed the deal when she said the neighbor lady loved cats and cat sat for them. Nice house with a built-in cat sitter? Yes, please. I messaged my realtor and told her, forget the previous house, this one is the winner. On top of it, the neighborhood was a lovely one very near a town with multiple grocery stores, home improvement store, pet store, basically everything you could need. It's a tiny village that was very quiet and which the house owner said was very friendly. I viewed a few more houses on open house day, had a lengthy conversation with another owner who had remodeled his house, only finding an exit plan when another couple walked in to view the house. I found in general that the people in Zeeland were really friendly. It reassured me that, yeah, this is a place I could really enjoy living. I returned home excited about taking this huge leap, and within 24 hours of arriving home, my offer on the house had been received and accepted. I had a house in the Netherlands. The only catch was I confirmed the purchase at 3 a.m. and forgot to verify with my makler that there would need to be a provision should my house in the U.S. not sell in time. Given the U.S. housing market, I decided, I'll take the risk. My realtor was confident my house would sell quickly. In the next episode, we'll talk about how quickly my house sold.